It's Sunday, December 18th, 2022. I'm in this. I'm watching the CBS this morning from E51, which was Sunday morning. Um, and on it, it had a very interesting reference about Hanukkah. I had never heard what Hanukkah was about before, like not in this context. This context says, or this broadcast says, it had something to do with the military winning of a war I had never even heard of between Maccabee and the Syrian Greek. And I'm like, and then I had to go, the definition sparked more definition. And apparently it's this secret empire. And I'm like, hmm. And I'm like, now what is that? Because again, I arrived. The children across the street got to light candles. They invited me in. They just said they got 8 nights of presents. That was it. We had Santa. He came down the chimney. There was a fire at the bottom, but only one. Um, but like these hallmark things that have great significance were not passed down to the children. In like, things are lost in translation, it feels, and being stuck on the interior. And I said, I had to preface this for Alexander today and Daniel, and Anthony was in the car, or 2012 was in the car. And um I said to him, and by the way, in the leaflet, they honored my son and my grandfather, my no. They have my son with my name, Cattaruzza, um, as playing the part of Joseph, which I greatly appreciate the typographical correction. Um, anyhow, so um, I was trying to preface in this modern world, knowing that ancient civilization is so important, but not really ever getting the construct that I needed and like an anchor. I'm like, all right, so since my grappling point, for which I'm still trying to traverse, and now I have this next gen, I'm sacred geometry. He's a double down of the sacred geometry. And I'm already, it feels like blowing in the wind, and I have to detach from quantum reality of elsewhere and reconstruct rather quickly within my own constellation and cluster of just points of light. I know between Alexander and I, there's symmetry, and then there's asymmetry between Benjamin, Daniel, and Anthony. So I'm like, I made them all cosmically within my own cosmetics and cosmology, to bring forth next generation in like a creator kind of a way. So I'm like in that deep space and crevasse of like deep space where there's nothing else except for what I created in that context. How do I figure out my life frame from where I've been through, what has been taught, in where what I've experienced, and then what they're throwing out at me as pieces of a reality for which I didn't even have the ability to get to that level of family knowledge. Um, so I'm having this conversation with my children who find so many, like today. I mean, they show up. I tell them, I want you, and you're coming into God's house. I want you to show respect. I want you to be best dressed. And they show up in sweatshirts and whatever else they showed up in. Again, it's come as you are, um, in this reality of how has the pendulum swung and where parents' expectations are, grandparents' expectations, and where it almost feels like in this homeless shelter has it slid. Um, so I'm trying to find out, and I can see they're having a respect enough to hold a conversation with me, but I can see like they're totally annoyed by the whole church thing and the whole Jesus thing and the whole like we didn't do this growing up. Why is this such a big deal to you now? And I'm trying to explain to them to anchor myself back into their reality, and I'm like, first of all, we had a different situation because they had to go away on the weekends to visit. One, he got custody once a week, and it was on the weekends to stay consistent. Um, so that meant that my weekend work that I did, they weren't home for, freed me up, but it also caused other forks in the road. So, one of them being the lack of religious ability, because the Catholics do it during the week. I'm not Catholic. My Episcopalians do it on the weekends. They weren't with me. So it leaves this really large hole in this broken family unit, which is just really just compounding problems throughout my existence here. So anyhow, so I am trying to find a steady ground with them, and I'm like, do I go Marvel superheroes to connect with them? Like if I'm doing superhero work for your future, grounding myself so I can find out like where I belong, cuz again, I don't want to go into like your dad tried killing me thing cuz I never brought that up before, and I'm really not ready to have that conversation with them. So, like, living and hiding with you, keeping you safe because I really didn't trust him, like that reality. But then, of course, compounded problems because Tia Frio showed up, and it was like, now how the hell do I get out of this? And I can't rely on that. And then I got both of them coming at me. It is just a disaster. But anyhow, so I'm like, all right, so keep it short and sweet. Why church? I said, okay, so here's the thing. There are things that go on outside of our safety zone of where we live and where we reside. And if you don't have an anchor into the community that you're existing in, how do you ever build a basis of reality to know and compare and contrast in case things in your future or around you start to move or start to not feel right? How are you ever going to know and be able to question and have a basis for questioning if you're unaware and have no hook or basis or foundation in a community? And Alexander said something about it. Seemed that was something that's in one of his video games, which I had never heard of. And I was like, but you've heard of it. It makes sense to you. They're like, yeah. I'm like, all right. So Episcopalian, I was like, is from my youth. It's where they introduced me into for whatever it is. Now you've been. Um, and now you have a visual construct of what it looks like. Um, for me, it was a set of vocabulary I find somewhat helpful. Um, but again, it was this process. So now that I don't have like a classroom to go to every day, the once a week somewhere to go, how do you find people in a community, regardless of what, in your local area, to try to at least stay socially engaged at some level, that's safer, I mean, than going out like to just a pub or a tavern or whatever, especially where there's no money requirement in order to go into the church facility. So anyhow, so I said, so going in there and learning and getting like a weekly update on a church calendar for almost like a homeland security like anchor just makes sense to me. I was like, so then when I watch the news of what's going on in, could be anybody's, whatever, I was like, I just have like a rock, a solid foundation. I was like, does that make sense? They're like, yeah. I was like, because there's stuff that goes on in the foreign countries. And now that travel is so prevalent, how do you stay safe and how do I stay safe in New York if something's going on in foreign territory and they're traveling into New York and they know what they're doing? How are we ever to discover it if it puts us in imminent danger? And Alexander's like, right. I was like, so that's the importance for me at the moment with church, just so you know. And so he was like, oh, no. He's like, well, it makes sense. He says, I understand. He's like, we just, again, you didn't like, it wasn't something that was in our house. And I go, right. No, I get that. Like, the week was our week with centered around all of you. And then the weekend was me going to work and you guys went away and that was it. So, so I had that with them this morning, which was nice because it was a gentle conversation with where I'm at and what I'm up to and what I'm trying to just reorient myself in something that feels somewhat correct. Um, whether it's the correct edition or episode, I'm not quite sure. I don't, I haven't figured out how to, I don't know. So I'm watching the CBS this morning, and this is the first mention of Maccabee and the Syrian Greek War. Things my grandfather, I would imagine, would have known more about than myself. But here in the schools that I went to, they were not teaching of this. And I also noticed the menorah on this only has four, whereas the modern, this is, I guess, ancient or foreign, the modern interpretation on the illustrations in material world, they represent it as eight, with the one candle in the middle meaning the nine. And for me, that ties back locally to Americana, Manhasset Americana, and the flags. It looks to me like flagship. They usually fly the one country flag and then some adornment of eight. But I don't know if that's a merchant marine thing. They're saying it's a Jewish thing. That gets confusing because what about the Christians and who handles what? And there's nobody to ask these questions to. And then last night on national security, like, what do I do? They had 16, they collected 16 different spellings of Hanukkah. And I'm like, but there's only 12 tribes in Israel, supposedly. Now, how do I traverse that? Where did four extras come from? Or is that this, is there some extra something in play in New York that that's put me very really in harm's way. I mean, considering the correct suitor did not come along, considering the correct formal marriage didn't happen, and considering that I doubled my sacred geometry in some immaculate way under some Virgin Mary, whatever, veil.
Hanukkah commemorates the military victory of the Maccabees over the Syrian Greek army. But the real miracle.
Now this, that's an, is that an ancient menorah? Is that a foreign menorah? Is that, if there's four headless horsemen, I've heard that thrown out there too in narratives, and I don't know, is that a parabolic? That's a new word I just learned. Um, so four branch, I mean, over here now in modern world, traditionally, I've only ever seen it represented as eight with the high nine in the center. So again, I'm just really trying to figure out how humans are gathering and explaining themselves. I'm looking for pieces of reality to meld what they've told me it is, which I take them at face value because I don't have any other choice, and then how it's being urbanized or modernized in some contemporary while I'm here, just to have a grappling system to keep a reality. So this way, if things change or things slide, I mean, at least I'm staying current.
The oil burning menorah in the besieged temple continued to shine for.
That's another thing. I mentioned this oil. Now, in my youth, there was somebody who came who said that he had oil partnerships. I did not know what that meant, did not know who he was necessarily, other than how he introduced himself, which for this I cannot remember. Um, I cannot remember how the formal and correct introduction was, but I know there was an introduction and I know it was very important, but the exact word format has almost been like stolen from my ability to recall it for whatever reasons going on at Sacred Geometry. I'm not sure. Um, so he said that he had these oil partnerships, and now here they're saying that they have this. Um, they have this that they cook everything in oil. And I'm like, that's really interesting. And I know in the desert area, oil is very important to seal the skin so you don't dehydrate medically. That I got. Um, so I know oil is very important commodity. Um, and then also they had this thing on the evening news about doing a Hanukkah carol instead of a Christmas carol. They're doing a Hanukkah carol, and they had on this group of gentlemen who were in what I call gingham check shirts. Um, it looks like graph paper, and they actually call it graph, GRAF. But to me, it looks like graph, GRAPH paper, and that is what Thomas Jefferson was wearing when he drove the Audi and visited me in Ronkonkoma. For however, before we went to Port Jefferson. Um, so I don't know what they're trying to say about that. If it's just a coined incident or if it's somehow whatever orchestrated to represent the correct whatever. I'm not sure. Um, but I do see these facts lining up. They also did on this, talking about oil, but gasoline. They had on this big thing about the big trucks. I saw F. They have the F series, and I'm like, no, is that have anything to do with aviation? Now that I just learned about the F series, the SU series, and the J series, because now I'm starting to learn these layers of things, and I'm like, what could that mean?
For 8 days, even though, according to the story, there was only enough oil to last one. We've long had the latke or potato pancake to remember the marvel. Sufganiyot came much later, according to culinary history expert Avery Robinson.
The jelly donut came into the Hanukkah celebration as the sufganiyah about 100 years ago in the 1920s.
So it's new.
It's pretty new. All things considered, it is a very new thing.
Sufganiyot may be new, but its origins go way back.
The earliest
Now, this is where they had this gingham check shirt.
Damashevitz is modernizing Hanukkah this year with this chocolate that it's calling crypto gelt. Gelt is sometimes synonymous with tokens for a game of dreidel. At Congregation Sons of Israel Nyack, families are celebrating Sunday with a concert from men's a cappella group 613. The beauty of the holiday is letting people know.
I don't know how they find all these people. They're so creative and they've got such an underground market, but I have no idea how to find them and follow them. And again, I guess that's when they community together and they socialize together, for which I've never really found whatever and whatever. Now here they mention this pickup truck. First pickup truck I have to think of that I ever saw, I did not have a name for it, was the person who came to visit me in Eaton's Neck. I was invited, I think it was Eaton's Neck. I was living in Cold Spring Harbor, but I was working in Huntington, and whoever, maybe it was Centerport, I can't really remember the exact beach's name. It was some private beach, and they asked me to go to this private beach on the island, on Long Island, which I did. And there was a flatbed truck. I don't know what kind of truck it was. I don't know if it was an F series. I don't know if it was a Ram. I don't know what it was. But the back door, I think they call it a gate, they opened and we just sat on that. And then in the main flatbed of the truck, there was like a whole bunch of people seated. They were all together, but we just had a conversation. I know that conversation was important. I don't know that person's name either, but I know it's significant. And then I'm looking and I know one other very important person came to visit me. Just one. There's so few in my life frame of importance that when they arrive, I know the difference between them and the everyday degregates. So when Houston arrived, he had a Toyota. But again, the first truck person, before any of the problems happened on this island, had a conversation with me in a different truck, whatever it was.
Talk about a special gift for the holidays. One big ticket item that seems to be on a lot of lists this year is the pickup truck. Why are they so popular? With Lee Cowan, let's go for a drive.
More and more and more cars.
We Americans have long had a crush on our cars.
Some trucks are good for only one thing, rough work.
But when it comes to a really committed vehicular relationship, well, it's the pickup truck that sets our hearts aflutter. Turns out things like towing capacity and payload can really get the motor running.
Bring all the gifts for under the tree. And while you're at it, bring the tree.
Trucks represented about 20% of U.S. sales this year. That's a tad more than cars. In fact, pickups account for the top 3 of the 5 best-selling vehicles. Take Ford's F-Series. It's been America's best-selling truck for over 4 decades. Just how important are they to Ford's bottom line? We asked CEO Jim Farley.
Yeah, is that tied into aviation? I'm just curious. Is it F-Series in the sky and on the ground? Again, don't know who to ask. Don't know how it's relevant. Don't know why such facts, while serious and important, may have in fact hurt me on my journey, with people fighting over them at why do they say there's 12 tribes? I'm in a blue state, and then all of a sudden now there's 16. Some things went wrong. It's a problem, but I don't know how to get help. And for some reason, Santa wears red and white. So I don't know if that's part of like a side story narrative and how that all works. Again, the humans haven't been very forthcoming.
Series is the second most valuable consumer product by revenue behind it.
Just like this. I was wearing white overalls, and I think I was wearing some black shirt. And that's how the conversation went in respectable. And I think I had some kind of like kids or Vans or something on, like some kind of like little white tennis shoe on. But that's how respectful it was. And then there was like a whole whatever. But that was before the whole crazy donkey and everything that went off rails in a train wreck.
It is enormous. This is the modern horse. It's your reliable partner you can do work on, you can have fun with, you can kind of go anywhere. It just fits an American lifestyle.
Pickups are the most popular in the states you'd probably expect. Texas, Wyoming, North Dakota, and the like.
Now, interestingly enough, in my life frame, in the time frame where things went from bad to worse with Mr. 1975, he all of a sudden, no credit, no money, no anything, winds up driving home in a GMC Sierra for whatever the hell's backing him and giving him lift, while I'm thrown into this world of hurt, and he doesn't even have a sacred geometry piece. I have 2. I'm the square root of 9. He's a nobody.
Where construction, ranching, and hauling are a way of life. But there are plenty of coastal pickups now, too.
Look at this, though.
We'll steer clear of pickup politics here, but suffice it to say that you can't get sales numbers that big by selling pickups in red states alone. It's millennials, according to J.D. Power, who buy the most new trucks these days. And yes, some have no desire to haul anything more than a bag of groceries.
Oh, actually, that was supposed to be for me.
I love it.
Interestingly enough, he no longer has the car because just like I told whatever and whatever, when I also told them that I never wanted the 51515, he wound up crashing it. However, for whatever reason, it's on file if somebody has clearance in order to pull the file. as to what he was up to. But he got in an accident and he totaled it. So, that's that. But once upon a time, there was a very nice, cordial meeting with somebody in a truck I rather admired. Later on, second person I rather admired his way of being. They're both very similar in a sense of the way that they carry themselves, which is not like degregates, but it's just a different way of being. It's just almost like, I mean, I wouldn't even call them high elf, only for the sense of, I think it's too feminine and they're too masculine. But again, it's more of like, that's more theater speak. It's star 1978, star 8378, Nicole, Cattaruzza, it's Earth, solar system, Milky Way, universe, galaxy is broken, and it's Bayside Station, Bayside, New York, 11361.